Well, good morning, everyone, and thanks so much for this really warm introduction. And thanks everyone here for organizing this really good event. It's the second year I've been lucky enough to be here, so it's fantastic actually to have some space to talk. And I know everyone probably is hungry and looking forward to coffee, so I try to be short. There you go. So yeah, my name is Alejandra. I work at NSERC, which I'm hoping everyone is familiar with. So if you are not, we are one of the free funding agencies of the government. We fund research in science and engineering. And I work in particular in the Ontario Regional Office. We have small regional offices scattered around the country. So ours is based in Mississauga, so not that far from here. So I just wanted to touch base a little bit on some of the grants we have, and in particular, I wanted to talk about partnership grants. So we have several funds that are available for partnerships between academia and industry, and I think that's something actually very important today. I was hearing the panel, was very interesting. I kept hearing words like collaboration, and though not being obviously an expert in this, I do feel that there should be more collaboration happening in these fields regarding industry and academia, and I'm sure there's a lot of overlapping, and hopefully these programs that NSERC has will be a good way for people to encourage people to collaborate together to find solutions that I think are very important in this area. So yeah, as was mentioned before, NSERC is the primary funder for research in Canada. And here's a little bit of overview, and NSERC is really familiar, especially in academia, because it funds a lot of the basic research that's happening at the universities. But as you can see in this graph, actually a third of all the funding that we have available is for innovation, and in particular, we have a lot of grants available for partnership grants, as I mentioned. So I'm gonna speak briefly about 3 of the grants we have. In first place, we have a grant called Connect Grant. That the idea of the Connect grants is for people to get to know each other and start talking and start designing any collaborating projects they can have in mind. So for that, we have different levels. Level 1 is a grant for an individual professor to travel to a company or several companies to start discussions on projects they can collaborate with. And that funding is available for up to $5,000. And then we have the level 2 and 3, which are either regional or national workshops that can take place. So for example, this is a Connect level 2. So the idea is that we can provide any funding available for the event, as catering or any other technical things that you need, renting a space. So these events can take place and people can get to know each other. So, okay, you met someone either in one of these great Connect events or in another conference or wherever, and the idea is to, you decide, okay, yeah, we're gonna move forward, we want to start a collaboration, right? So we have a grant called Engage that is meant to foster first-time collaborations. These are collaborations for 6 months, any R&D projects that are aimed at solving a company-specific problem. And the idea is a first-time collaboration, and it's only 6 months because we want to give you the opportunity to get started and start this research collaboration together. We call it like sort of like a first date. Maybe you don't want to go there and get married on the first date. You just want to test the water, see how the research collaboration goes. And then maybe you can decide to extend this into something larger. So this grant is of $25,000 that are going to be paid to the university, to the professor, to work on this company-specific problem. This funding can be available to, usually it's used to hire students or research associates, postdocs to work on the project, or any other equipment, consumables that are needed for the project. Good news for industry is that there's no cash contribution required. All the cash will come from NSERC. There's a requirement of in-kind only. Applications are accepted anytime, rolling deadline. Intellectual property will belong to the company in this case, mainly because we want things to move fast, and we know that sometimes it can take a long time for these IP agreements to take place. So in the case of the Engage grants, the IP will belong to the company. And the success rate is approximately 90%, and the turnaround is of 6 weeks. So just here a little bit about the eligibility of the companies that are able to apply to engage, they need to operate from a Canadian base. So they don't need to be Canadian, but they do need to have some offices and to be doing some R&D in Canada. They have to be able to fully exploit their research results. So although obviously we're not expecting them to be an expert in the area of the project, they want to collaborate with the professor, right? Otherwise, why would they be collaborating? But we need to see that they actually have some technical knowledge and they're going to be able to advance any research results obtained. And we have a requirement that companies have 2 full-time employees and have been in operation for 2 years. Here's a little bit the impact that we have of Engage. So at the end of the grant, we have a survey that goes out. So it's very simple, no long reporting or anything, just a small survey you do online about how was the experience. We send this to professors, we send this to companies. And just to give you some highlights, 94% of companies would describe the project as a success. 1 in 4 Engage grants led into longer-term collaborations. And a lot of students also are hired after these projects. And overall, 98% of companies would recommend Engage to other companies. And the last thing I wanted to mention to you is the CRD grants, the Collaborative Research and Development Grants. Again, these are partnership grants between university and industry. This will be the next step, maybe if you have an Engage. This is the next step into a collaboration. So in this case, there are longer grants. It's more funding available. So the duration is variable. It can be 1 to 5 years. There's currently no minimum or maximum amount of money that you can ask for. Of course, you can have a prior relationship with the company. And in this case, you can have CRD grants that are larger. You can have collaborations between more than 1 company, more than 1 professor working on the same project. There is an industrial cash contribution in this case, but what NSERC is going to do is match these 2 to 1. So for every dollar in cash that the company puts, we will provide double of that. And again, the application is rolling deadline. You can apply anytime. Success rate is very high, approximately 85%, and you have the possibility of applying jointly with the Ontario Centres of Excellence or also with MITACs, which I didn't mention here. This is both applies for the Engage and for the CRD grant. So we're all actually trying to collaborate more with all the agencies out there to try to make things easier when you try to get funding and just do it once and not like several times. So that's about it. Here is my contact details. I'm try to be around Waterloo if possible often. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out, and I'll be around also later to discuss any questions or comments you might have. Thank you.
Işın Kaya, Mixanox Systems. I think I missed exactly 2 people required for the company, industrial company, 2 full-time?
2 full-time.
Full-time. Is it a new thing or?
It is more or less new. We can make some exceptions depending, so we can take that offline if the company looks very promising, and maybe we could make some exceptions, but the baseline is that we want to establish that companies will have the capacity to exploit their research results, so that's why we have the requirement of 2 full-time employees.
Second question, CRD funding, what is the turnaround time?
So depends on how much money is asked. If it's more or less a small one, in theory it's 3 months, though I'm hearing that it's actually a little bit longer. So yeah, at least 3 months because it goes out to peer review.
So that you can match with some other places like Ontario Power Authority or other funds with the CRD. Can you combine them?
It depends which funding. So mainly we're federal funding, so if the funding is provincial, you could do that, but if the other funding is federal too, you couldn't do that.
Okay, thank you.
We can discuss more later about the details. Okay, thank you very much. I'll be around anyway, so.